My sister and her fiancé were crying at my door, claiming the landlord was evicting them. They needed my help. But I just remembered what I overheard at my father's birthday, them joking about how I was too dumb to realize they'd never pay me back. So I smiled and handed them a folder. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The migraine had been clinging to me for 3 days, a relentless, icy grip behind my right eye. I was sitting in my darkened living room, a damp cloth over my forehead, the ringer on my phone silenced. As a university registrar, the end of the semester was my personal nightmare. I just processed grades and academic probations for over 6,000 students, and my brain felt like it had been wrung out to dry. I was 36, single, and my primary relationship was with my spreadsheets. My apartment was my sanctuary, a quiet, orderly place where everything made sense. When the doorbell rang, it felt like an act of violence. The chime was shrill, insistent. I ignored it. Then came the banging. Not a polite knock, but a frantic, rattling the frame pounding. I dragged myself to the door, my head pulsing with every step. I peeked through the peephole and my stomach instantly clenched. It was my younger sister, Daphne, and her fiancé, Marco. Daphne was sobbing, her face blotchy and red. Marco had his arm around her, his expression a mask of theatrical worry. Though he was clearly aiming it at the peephole, he had to know I was behind. I opened the door, keeping the security chain latched. "Daphne, what's wrong? It's 10 p.m. "Aggie, you have to help us," she wailed, pushing against the door. "He's kicking us out, the landlord, he's evicting us." Marco chimed in, his voice smooth and urgent. "Agatha, please, we just got the notice. It's on the door, we have 3 days. 3 days, we have nowhere to go, you didn't pay the rent." The last 3 words hit me like a splash of cold water. You didn't pay. Not we missed a payment, but you. I stared at them through the 2-inch gap. Daphne, my 27-year-old sister, the Etsy shop owner, who specialized in beaded jewelry that she never quite managed to sell. And Marco, 30, the startup founder, whose company consisted of a slick webpage and a non-functioning app he'd been beta testing for 2 years. For 8 months, I had been paying the rent on their trendy downtown loft. 8 months of me pulling double shifts during enrollment peaks, canceling my vacation plans, and eating instant noodles just so they could get on their feet and save for the wedding. The migraine, the exhaustion, the stress of my job, it all evaporated, replaced by a sudden, chilling clarity. I wasn't just tired, I was being played. "I don't understand," I said, my voice flat. "I gave you the money for this month. I transferred it on the 1st, just like always." This was a lie, of course, but it was the first one that came to mind. "No, you didn't," Daphne cried, her voice rising to a shriek. "I checked the account, the money's not there. How could you do this to us, Aggie? We're family." I looked at her, really looked at her. Her designer handbag, Marco's new limited edition sneakers. I thought about the photos she'd posted last week of their working brunch at a $50 a plate restaurant. I thought about the 8 months of my life I had sacrificed. And then I thought about what I'd heard 3 weeks ago at our father's birthday party. I closed the door, unlatched the chain, and opened it fully. They both looked startled, expecting me to either yell or burst into tears and write a check. I did neither. "Come in," I said, my voice betraying nothing. "We need to talk." They walked past me, dripping entitlement and false panic onto my clean entryway rug. As I watched them settle on my sofa, the same sofa I'd stopped myself from replacing because the money was needed elsewhere, I felt a resolve harden in my chest. They thought I was their safety net. They thought I was their fool. They had no idea what I'd been doing for the last 3 weeks. The betrayal was worse than any migraine. The moment they were inside, the dynamic shifted. The panic evaporated from Marco's face, replaced by an air of impatient expectation. He sat forward, elbows on his knees, as if preparing for a business negotiation he was certain to win. Daphne, on the other hand, kept up the waterworks, dabbing at her dry eyes with the sleeve of her cashmere blend sweater, one I recognized from a boutique I couldn't afford. "Aggie, I just don't know what we're going to do," she whimpered, looking around my modest, one-bedroom apartment. I could see the faint distaste in her eyes as she scanned my practical, second-hand furniture. "The landlord is a monster. He said if we're not out by Friday, he's changing the locks and throwing our stuff on the street." "He can't legally do that without a court order," I said, my voice still neutral. I walked past them to my kitchen, my back to them as I filled the electric kettle. My hands were perfectly steady. "He has to serve you a formal eviction notice, which gives you time to respond. A pay or quit notice is standard." Marco scoffed. "Lawyers, courts, Agatha, we don't have time for that. We need the money. Now, you just need to call him in the morning and wire him this month's rent plus the late fees, and probably next month's just to smooth things over." I turned, kettle in hand. "You want me to pay 2 months' rent plus late fees for a payment you were supposed to make?" "No, Aggie, a payment you were supposed to make," Daphne insisted. "You promised you'd help us until the wedding. You said you'd cover the rent so we could save for the deposit on the venue." "I promised I'd help you get on your feet," I corrected her, my voice quiet. "I've been paying your rent for 8 months. That's $16,000. When I agreed to help, you both swore it was temporary. You both said you were working, that Marco's app was about to get its first round of funding." "It is," Marco snapped, a little too quickly. "These things take time. The VC guys are just finalizing the paperwork. You don't understand the startup world, Agatha. It's not like your little desk job. We're building an empire." I looked at him, an empire built on my salary. The question hung in the air, sharp and heavy. Daphne's fake crying sputtered to a halt. This was not how the script was supposed to go. I was supposed to be apologetic, flustered, rushing to my checkbook. "What is that supposed to mean?" Daphne asked, her voice turning cold. The victim act was melting away, revealing the hard, petulant core I knew so well. "It means I'm tired, Daphne. I'm tired of working 60-hour weeks so you can sell 2 bracelets and Marco can network over expensive lunches. I'm tired of putting my entire life on hold." "On hold?" Daphne stood up, her face twisted in disbelief. "What life, Aggie? You don't have a life. You have a job and this boring apartment. We're out there living, we're building a future. You should be happy to help. That's what family does." Her words stung, exactly as intended. For a moment, the old, familiar shame washed over me. The feeling of being the boring, responsible older sister. The one who always cleaned up the messes. The one who was always stable and therefore always expected to provide. But then I remembered. I remembered the scent of pine trees and birthday cake. I remembered the sound of their laughter floating through the crisp night air. She's too dumb to realize we'll never pay her back. I took a deep breath, pushing the memory down. Not yet. The time wasn't right. I had to stick to the plan. "You're right," I said, my voice softening. The change in my tone was immediate. Marco relaxed, and Daphne's expression eased from anger back to annoyance. "You're right, I'm sorry. I've been so stressed at work and this migraine is killing me. I must have forgotten to set up the transfer. It's my fault." Daphne's relief was palpable. She practically beamed. "Oh, Aggie, thank God. I knew you wouldn't let us down. So you'll call him in the morning, you'll fix it." "Of course," I said, giving her a weak, tired smile. "I'll take care of everything. You two just go home and get some sleep." Marco clapped his hands together, all charm again. "See, Daphne, I told you your sister was the best. You're a lifesaver, Agatha, truly." He leaned in and gave me a one-armed hug that felt like a snake coiling around my shoulders. I walked them to the door, promising again that I would handle it first thing. As they walked down the hall, I heard Daphne hiss at Marco, "See? I told you all I had to do was cry a little." I closed the door and locked the deadbolt. I leaned against it, the adrenaline draining away, leaving me shaking. They hadn't just forgotten. They had forgotten who I was. I wasn't just a registrar. I was the person who designed the entire university's system for tracking academic records and financial aid agreements. I lived in a world of contracts, fine print, and legal obligations. And for 8 months, I had been making my sister sign one. Our family dynamic was forged in crisis. When I was 16 and Daphne was 9, our mother passed away. Our father, Conrad, a kind and gentle man who made a living as a semi-retired carpenter, was shattered. He was a wonderful father, full of warmth and stories, but he was not an organized man. He was an artist with wood, not with finances or schedules. Overnight, I became the family's administrator. I was the one who learned to balance the checkbook, who made sure the mortgage was paid, who grocery shopped and cooked, and who helped Daphne with her homework. I was the one who sat with Dad while he grieved, and I was the one who held it together. I didn't get to be a rebellious teenager. I became a surrogate parent. I put my own dreams of studying art history on hold and chose a practical degree, finance, which led to my stable, secure, and soul-crushingly dull job as a registrar. I did it so Dad wouldn't have to worry. I did it so Daphne could have a normal childhood. Daphne, in turn, became the family's light. She was the creative one, the free spirit, the one who was shielded from all the ugly realities of our finances. I encouraged it. I wanted her to have the life I couldn't. I paid for her art supplies, her dance classes, and eventually her useless communications degree. I never complained. I never kept score. I just gave. Then, 2 years ago, Marco entered the picture. He found Daphne at an art fair where she was attempting to sell her beaded jewelry. He was all polished charm, expensive-looking, but rented suits, and grand pronouncements about disrupting the tech space. He told Daphne she was a brilliant artist, an untapped brand. He convinced her to stop thinking small and to quit her part-time job as a barista to focus on her Etsy shop full-time. He, meanwhile, was the founder of a startup called Linklight, which was allegedly a revolutionary new social media platform. The first time I met him, my internal alarms didn't just ring, they blared. We were at Dad's house for Sunday dinner. Marco spent the entire meal talking about venture capital, seed rounds, and his burn rate. The key, Conrad, he'd said, gesturing with his fork, is to spend money to make money. We're scaling up. That's why Daphne and I are looking for a new place. Her apartment is just not conducive to a creative executive lifestyle. That sounds expensive, ID said, cutting my roast beef. Marco gave me a pitying smile. It's an investment, Agatha. You have to think like an owner, not an employee. You wouldn't understand the pressure. He was vague about his past, evasive about his investors, and unnervingly interested in our family. He was particularly focused on Dad's house. This is a great property, Conrad, he'd said, tapping a wall. Lots of land. You know, the zoning in this neighborhood is changing. You could probably get a permit to build a duplex in the back. Huge passive income. Conrad, bless him, just laughed and said he liked his garden. The requests for money started small. Aggie, could you spot me $200? The Etsy platform fees are higher than I thought. Then, Aggie, Marco's investors are flying in, and we need to take them to a really nice dinner. Could you help us out? Then came the big one. 8 months ago, they found the loft. It was absurdly expensive, a 2-bedroom industrial space with exposed brick and 20-foot ceilings. They didn't have jobs, not real ones, so they couldn't pass the credit check. Aggie, it's perfect, Daphne had gushed over the phone. It has a 2nd bedroom Marco can use as an office, and the light for my product photography is amazing. We just need a little help. Just for a few months, until Marco's funding comes through and my shop takes off. We'll pay you back every single penny, I swear. I was hesitant. It was so much money. It was, in fact, the exact amount I had been putting into my future condo savings account every month. But she was my sister, and she swore it was temporary. Okay, I said, with a sigh that felt like it came from my bones. I'll help. But Daphne, I'm not a bank. We have to do this properly. For my own records, for my budget. I'll send you the money each month, and I just need you to sign a simple document. Just a one-page agreement stating that it's a loan and that you promise to repay it. Just so we're all clear. Daphne had laughed. Oh, Aggie, you and your spreadsheets. So formal, of course, whatever you want. You're the best sister in the world. So, on the first of every month for 8 months, I would transfer $2,000. And a day later, I would email Daphne a simple PDF titled Personal Loan Agreement Month X. It specified the amount, the date, and the terms, to be repaid in full upon request by Agatha, my last name. She would e-sign it and send it back within minutes, usually with a heart emoji. She thought it was a joke, a cute little quirk of her boring, older sister. She hadn't realized she was signing a confession. The scene at my father's 62nd birthday dinner was seared into my memory. It was 3 weeks before the eviction drama. We were at Conrad's house, the one I grew up in. He was grilling burgers in the backyard, the smell of charcoal and sawdust. His workshop was nearby, filling the air. It was a perfect, crisp October evening. I had stepped inside to the kitchen to take a call from my office, a frantic registrar in training who couldn't figure out a new software patch. I paced into the dining room, my back to the open patio door, murmuring instructions int. Oh, my phone. As I hung up, I heard Daphne and Marco talking, their voices drifting in from the fire pit just outside. They hadn't seen me. Another month banked, Marco said, his voice smug. 16 grand just like that. Your sister's a walking, talking ATM. I know, Daphne replied, and then she laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound, completely devoid of warmth. She's just so easy. Oh, Daphne, it's for my records. She's too dumb to realize we'll never pay her back. Who would even make their own sister sign something like that? A lonely spinster who wants to feel needed, Marco said. Honestly, babe, once we get the wedding gifts, we should see if we can get her to invest in Linklight. She's got that condo fund just sitting there. SHH not so loud, Dad will hear. Dad's half-deaf and thinks you're an angel. He's as clueless as she is. I stood frozen in the dining room, the phone slipping from my numb fingers. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just the money, it was the contempt. Too dumb, lonely spinster. They didn't just see me as a resource, they saw me as a pathetic joke. I turned and walked silently back through the kitchen, out the front door, and got into my car. I drove home, my mind a terrifying, cold blank. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just processed. When I got home, I opened my laptop. I went to the secure folder on my hard drive labeled Family. Inside was another folder, Daphne Loans. I opened it. 8 PDF documents sat there, neatly filed. Loan Agreement March, PDF Loan Agreement April, PDF Loan Agreement May, PDF, and so on, all the way to October. Each one was signed. Each one was dated. Each one was a legally binding promissory note. My initial, blind fury wanted me to call her, to scream, to send her the files and demand my money. But my registrar brain, the part of me that was logical and strategic, took over. A confrontation would lead to a dramatic, tear-filled scene. She would twist the story, paint me as the villain, and cry to Dad. He would beg me to be the bigger person and forgive. And I would get nothing. No, they wanted to play a game. I would play a better one. The 1st of November was 10 days away. That was the date I was scheduled to send the next $2,000. I simply didn't. I transferred the money from my checking account into my high-yield savings, along with an extra $1,000 I'd saved. I blocked Daphne's and Marco's numbers from casual texts and calls, but left their ability to leave voicemails and knock on my door. I wanted them to feel the silence. Then I started to dig. I was a registrar, yes, but my job was essentially data management and investigation. I spent my days tracking down obscure academic records, verifying international transcripts, and flagging fraudulent applications. Finding information was my superpower. I started with Linklight. The website was beautiful, but the Meet the Team page was all stock photos. I did a reverse image search. Lead developer, Jan, was actually smiling man in office from a German stock photo site. Head of marketing, Sven, was enthusiastic millennial with laptop. The only real person was Marco. I ran a business registry search in our state. No Linklight Inc. or Linklight LLC existed. I expanded the search. Nothing. The entire company was a phantom, a simple website template he'd probably bought for $50. Next, I looked up Marco himself. This was harder. He had a common name, but I had his date of birth from a rental application I'd helped Daphne fill out. I paid $49.95 for a comprehensive background check. The results were staggering. Marco wasn't a startup founder. He had a string of failed businesses, 2 small claims court judgments against him for unpaid debts to vendors, and an eviction from an apartment 2 years ago. But the real bomb was his marital status. Marco was still married. He had been separated from his wife for 3 years, but the divorce was never finalized. According to the court records I found in a neighboring state, she had filed, but Marco had vanished, never responding to the summons, stalling the entire process. He wasn't just a con artist, he was a bigamist in the making. I sat back, my heart hammering. He wasn't just planning to use Daphne, he was planning to commit a felony with her. He couldn't legally marry her. Their entire wedding fund was a sham, not just to get money from me, but likely from her as well. I saved everything. I printed the background check, the stock photo results, the court records. I placed them in a neat, separate folder. I now had the loan agreements, which was my leverage. And I had the truth about Marco, which was my nuclear option. For 3 weeks, I waited. I went to work. I paid my own bills. I transferred money into my condo fund, and I waited for the inevitable, frantic banging on my door. When they showed up that night, desperate and demanding, I had been fully prepared. After I let them convince me to fix my mistake, I sent them away, promising to handle it in the morning. They left my apartment relieved, convinced I was still firmly under their control. I slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Daphne. Called the landlord, he said he hasn't heard from you. Aggie, you promised, call him. I ignored it. An hour later, a voicemail, this time from Marco. His voice was tight, the charm gone. Agatha, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it's not funny. Daphne is hysterical. You are ruining our lives. Call the landlord and pay him. Now. I went to work. I sat in meetings. I processed graduation applications. My phone buzzed 17 more times. I let every call go to voicemail. That evening, they were back. This time, the banging on my door was so loud, my neighbor poked his head out of his apartment. I opened the door, and before I could even speak, Marco pushed his way inside. Daphne followed, her face a mask of pure rage. How dare you, she shrieked, all pretense of the crying victim gone. You lied to us, you said you'd fix it. The landlord just laughed at me. He said he's filing the eviction tomorrow. This is your fault. My fault? I asked, closing the door calmly. I walked over to my bookshelf, where I'd placed a simple brown accordion file. My fault that you two, a 27-year-old and a 30-year-old, can't pay your own rent. You promised, Daphne screamed. I promised to help, I said, my voice cutting through her screech. I loaned you money, and you were so grateful you even signed receipts for me. I opened the file. I pulled out the top document. It was the agreement for October. I held it up. Daphne's eyes widened. What is that? Marco sneered, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. That's just your weird little spreadsheet thing. It's not real. It's a promissory note, Marco, I said. I pulled out the other 7. 8 of them to be exact, 1 for each month, signed by Daphne. A total of $16,000. It's a simple, legally binding contract. And the terms are very clear, to be repaid in full upon request by Agatha. I fanned the documents out on the coffee table. I am requesting repayment, in full, now. Daphne stared at the papers, her signature clearly visible on each one. She looked as if I'd slapped her. Aggie, that was just a formality. That wasn't. You can't be serious." "I am perfectly serious," I said. "You know, it's funny what you learn when you're feeling motivated. I was so stressed about this, I decided to do a little research, just to make sure my investment was safe." I turned to Marco. "You, for instance, Marco, founder of Linklight, very impressive." I reached back into the file and pulled out the second folder, the one with my investigation. "It's a shame your entire team is just a collection of stock photos," I said, tossing the printouts onto the table. "This lead developer, his name is Smiling Man in Office. I'm surprised you didn't just name him John Doe." Marco's face went white. What are you talking about?" Daphne whispered, looking from me to Marco. "Marco, what is she talking about?" "She's crazy," Marco stammered, his eyes darting to the door. "She's making it up. She's just angry about the money." "Am I?" I said. I saved the best for last. I pulled out the final document from the folder. The certified copy of his marriage record from Clark County, Nevada. "Because I was also very interested to learn about your wedding plans. You two seem so excited. The problem is, Marco, you can't legally get married, because you are already married." I dropped the marriage certificate on top of the pile. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet I could hear the hum of my refrigerator. Daphne's head swiveled slowly from the paper to Marco. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Her voice was a terrifyingly low, cold whisper. "Marco, who is Jennifer Rose Alani?" Marco lunged, not at me but at the papers. He tried to scoop them all up to destroy the evidence, but I was faster. I grabbed the folder and held it to my chest. "Get out," I said. "You can't prove any of this," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You hacked me. This is illegal. I'll sue you." "You can't sue me for looking up public records," I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline but my resolve firm. "Eviction notices, small claims judgments, marriage licenses, it's all there for anyone to find, if they just know where to look. Now, get out of my apartment." "Daphne," he pleaded, turning to my sister. "Babe, she's lying. She's trying to break us up. She's always been jealous of you, of us." Daphne was staring at the marriage certificate on the table. She looked up at him, her face completely, terrifyingly blank. "Are you married, Marco?" she asked. "It's complicated. I was going to tell you." "Get out," she whispered. "Daphne." "Get out," she shrieked, grabbing a heavy glass vase from my side table. "Get out of here, you liar." Marco didn't need to be told again. He scrambled for the door, threw it open, and was gone. Daphne stood there, trembling, the vase still held aloft. Then, a sound I hadn't heard in years, a raw, broken sob tore out of her. The vase crashed to the floor and she collapsed, folding in on herself. She didn't cry about the apartment or the eviction or the money. She just wailed, "He lied to me. He lied to me." I watched her for a long moment. The part of me that had raised her wanted to rush over, to hold her, to tell her it would be okay. But the part of me she and Marco had created, the lonely spinster, the dumb ATM, just stood there. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just let her cry. Daphne's breakdown was short-lived. The moment the shock wore off, her primary emotion, the one that had guided her entire life, surfaced: self-preservation. She stayed on my floor for perhaps 10 minutes, and then the sobs subsided, replaced by sniffles and, finally, a hard, cold silence. She stood up, wiping her nose on the back of her hand. She wouldn't look at me. "You ruined my life," she whispered. I was stunned. What, Daphne, he lied to you. He's a con man, he's married." "And you just had to tell me, didn't you?" She spat, her eyes flashing with a familiar, venomous resentment. "You couldn't just pay the rent and keep your mouth shut. You had to investigate. You had to dig and dig until you found something to destroy me with. You've always been jealous of me. Jealous that I had love and you had. Your stupid, boring job." "Daphne, he didn't love you," I said, my voice flat, the last bit of my sympathy evaporating. "He was using you, just like you were both using me." "We were not," she shrieked. "We were in trouble, we needed help. And you, my own sister, you decided to play detective and ruin everything. What am I supposed to do now? Where am I supposed to go? I don't know, Daphne, I said, gathering the scattered papers from the floor. That's not my problem. Not your problem. I'm your sister. I'm going to be homeless because of you. You are going to be homeless because you and your married fiancé built a life you couldn't afford on my back, I countered, sliding the papers back into their folders. And as for the $16,000 you owe me, I expect a payment plan to start immediately. That was what finally broke her. The realization that the money wasn't just gone, it was due. She stared at me, her mouth open. You're actually going to make me pay you back, after all this, after you just blew up my entire life? Yes, I said, I am. She let out a sound of pure disgust. You're a monster, Agatha, a cold, heartless monster. I'm going to Dad. I'm going to tell him everything you did. Good, I said, opening my apartment door. Go, but remember, Daphne, I have proof. You just have a story, get out. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell off my wall. I knew exactly what she would do. She would run to Conrad, our father, and spin a tale of woe. She would be the victim. I would be the cruel, jealous older sister who, in a fit of rage, had torpedoed her happiness and left her for broke. And Dad, with his soft heart, would believe her. Or at least, he would want to. He would call me, begging me to make peace. I had to get to him first, but not with anger, with facts. The next day was Saturday. I drove to my dad's house, the one I grew up in. His pickup truck was in the driveway, and I could hear the sound of a sander coming from his workshop in the garage. I found him there, covered in a fine layer of sawdust, carefully smoothing the edge of a beautiful rocking chair. He smiled when he saw me. Aggie, what a surprise, honey. Come to see the old man. Hi, Dad, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need to talk to you about something. It's about Daphne. His smile faded. He switched off the sander, and the sudden silence of the garage felt heavy. Is she okay? She called me last night, hysterical, said you two had a terrible fight. She was incoherent, something about her apartment. She and Marco are being evicted, Dad, I said. Evicted? Oh my goodness, why, what happened? Because I stopped paying their rent, I said simply. Conrad stared at me. You were paying their rent for how long, Aggie? 8 months, Dad, $16,000. He leaned back against his workbench, his face pale. 16? Agatha, why didn't you tell me? That's your house money. Because she's my sister, I said, the old, familiar tightness in my throat. Because she promised she'd pay me back. She and Marco, they said they just needed a few months to get on their feet. Oh, Aggie, he breathed, running a hand through his grayin. Gee, hair. That's not why I'm here, Dad. She's going to come to you. She's going to tell you I'm a monster. She's going to ask you for money to fix this. And before she does, you need to see this. I opened the accordion file. I didn't show him the marriage certificate first. I didn't show him the stock photos. I showed him the 8 signed loan agreements. He took them one by one. He's a carpenter, a man who understands contracts, bids, and invoices. He read the simple, clear language. He saw her signature. She signed these, he asked, his voice quiet. Every month, I said. She thought it was a joke. Then I told him everything. I told him about the conversation I overheard at his birthday party. I told him the exact words they used. Too dumb, lonely spinster. I watched my father's face, a kind, gentle face I had loved my entire life, harden. The softness in his eyes was replaced by a slow-burning anger I had not seen since my mother passed away. They said that, he whispered, about you. Yes, I said, and Dad, that's not even the worst of it. I then laid out the rest of the file. The fake company, the small claims judgments, and finally the marriage certificate. He stared at the paper for a full minute. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a profound, terrible sadness. All this time, he's been, and she's been with him. She didn't know he was married, Dad. I'm sure she didn't know that part, but she knew about the money. She was in on that. He nodded slowly. He gathered the papers and put them back in the folder, his hands, usually so steady, trembling slightly. "What you did, Agatha," calling them out, "that took guts. That was the right thing to do." "She hates me," I whispered. "She's lost," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's lost, and she's let that parasite poison her. But you are my daughter, you are your mother's daughter, you are strong and you are good. And I am so sorry I didn't see this." He pulled me into a hug, and the smell of sawdust and Old Spice was so overwhelmingly Dad that I finally broke. I buried my face in his flannel shirt and cried for the first time. I cried for my sister, for my money, and for the naive, trusting person I used to be. "It's okay, Aggie," he murmured, patting my back. "It's going to be okay, we'll handle this, together." Just then, we heard a car door slam in the driveway. Daphne stormed into the workshop without knocking, her eyes red-rimmed and furious. She was still wearing the same clothes from the night before. When she saw me standing there with Dad, she skidded to a halt. "What is she doing here?" Daphne demanded, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Did you run here to poison him against me? Did you show him your secret files?" "Daphne, calm down," Conrad said, his voice low and firm. It was his workshop voice, the one that meant business. It stopped her cold. She was used to Dad, not Conrad. "Don't tell me to calm down," she yelled. "She's ruined my life, she got me kicked out of my house, and she broke up my relationship. All because she's a jealous, miserable old maid." The words "old maid" hung in the dusty air. I flinched, but Dad stepped forward. "That's enough, Daphne," he said. "Not another word." "No," Daphne advanced on him, her face pleading. "Dad, you have to help me, she's trying to destroy me. Marco made some mistakes, okay? But we were in love, and she dug up all his private business just to hurt me, and now she's saying I owe her money." She spat the word like it was poison. "She wants me to pay her back for helping me. Can you believe that, her own sister?" Conrad looked at her, his face carved from stone. "I've seen the papers, Daphne." "They're not real," she insisted, her voice cracking with desperation. "That was just a game. A stupid thing Aggie made me do. You can't. Dad, you can't take her side. I'm your daughter." "So is she," Conrad said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And she's the daughter who has been paying her own way since she was 16. She's the daughter who put her own life on hold so you and I could be okay. She's the daughter who has been parenting you since your mother died." This hit Daphne harder than the marriage certificate. She recoiled, her face ashen. "That's not true." "It is true," Conrad said. "And how do you and that fraud, repay her? I know what you said, Daphne, at my birthday party." Daphne's eyes darted to me, wide with panic. She knew. My father continued, his voice shaking with a rage I'd never heard. "She's too dumb. A lonely spinster. An ATM. Is that what you think of your sister? The woman who has been funding your entire adult life?" Daphne's face crumpled. The self-righteous anger vanished, replaced by the terrified, guilty expression of a child caught red-handed. I didn't mean it. Marco, he what?" I said, finally speaking. My voice was cold and clear. "He made you say it. He made you laugh. He made you spend my $16,000 while I was eating instant noodles and canceling my vacations." She stammered. "You have nowhere to go," I stated. "You're evicted. Your fiancé is a married con man, you have no job, and you owe me $16,000. I paused, letting the reality of her situation settle on her. "So, here's what's going to happen." I looked at Dad. "She can't stay here, Dad, not for free. She'll do the same thing to you that she did to me." "Agatha, no," Daphne wailed. "Dad, please, I have nowhere else to go. I'm your daughter." "Agatha's right," Conrad said, his face grim. He turned to Daphne. "You can stay here on 2 conditions. 1, you will get a full-time job, not your Etsy shop. A real job with a W-2. I don't care if it's at the coffee shop or the grocery store. You will work, and you will work 40 hours a week." Daphne looked horrified. 2, he continued, "you will give me your paycheck. I will take out $500 for room and board, and the rest, all of it, will go directly to Agatha, every single week. Until that $16,000 plus interest is paid in full. Those are the terms. You either accept them or you can walk out that driveway and figure it out on your own. It was a brilliant, devastating move. He wasn't just kicking her out, he was putting her in receivership. My father, the gentle carpenter, had just become her financial warden. Daphne stared at him, her world completely collapsing. She had come here expecting a blank check and a shoulder to cry on. Instead, she was being handed an apron and a bill. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. She was looking for a crack, a moment of sympathy. I gave her nothing, I just held her gaze. "You did this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You took everything from me." "No, Daphne," I said, picking up my file. "I just handed you the invoice. You and Marco did the rest." I turned to my dad. "I'm going to go. I'll call you tomorrow." "I love you, Aggie," he said, and I knew he wasn't just saying it. He was seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time in years. "I love you too, Dad," I replied. I walked out of the workshop past Daphne, who stood frozen in a cloud of sawdust, a living statue of her own consequences. As I got in my car and pulled out of the driveway, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I just felt quiet. The migraine was gone. The weight on my shoulders had finally lifted. For the first time in my adult life, I was responsible for no one but myself. The silence in the car was absolute, and it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The downfall of Marco was swift, and from what I heard, deeply satisfying. After Daphne kicked him out, he apparently tried to crawl back to his actual wife, Jennifer. She, however, had been served with divorce papers a second time. Only this time, they were accompanied by a very neat, very anonymous folder of information detailing his fraudulent company and his affair with my sister. His wife's lawyer, armed with proof of criminal deception and adultery, took him to the cleaners. He lost any claim to their shared assets and was, last I heard, being investigated for wire fraud related to some of his Linklite investor promises. Daphne, true to my father's word, moved into her old childhood bedroom. The shock of her new reality was profound. For the first 2 weeks, she was sullen, angry, and barely spoke. But Conrad was immovable. He drove her to a job fair at the local community center. The Etsy influencer and creative brand owner ended up getting a job as a full-time receptionist at a local plumbing supply company. Her first paycheck was a brutal awakening. She brought it home, and Dad made her sit at the kitchen table with him. He had her endorse the check, and then he, Daphne, and I had a 3-way video call. "Agatha," he said, his face firm on my screen, "Daphne has her first payment for you." Daphne, looking exhausted and humiliated in a polyester polo shirt, held the check up to the camera. It was for $614.22. "Thank you, Daphne," I said, my voice polite and professional. "That brings your outstanding balance to $15,385.78. I will email you an updated statement." We did this every 2 weeks. It was excruciating. It was also necessary. The change in her was not immediate. It was glacial. She started packing her own lunch because she couldn't afford to buy it. She started taking the bus because Dad wouldn't let her use his car for free. She began to understand, for the first time in her 27 years, the simple, crushing math of being alive. The math I had shielded her from. About 6 months into her repayment plan, I got a call from her. Not from Dad's phone, but from her own. I almost didn't answer. "Hello," I said cautiously. "Hi," her voice was small. I just won. "Ted to tell you, I'm getting a promotion." "Oh," I said surprised. That's good, Daphne, congratulations." "It's just to shift manager," she said quickly. "It's stupid, but it's an extra $2 an hour. I want to increase my payments to you." I sat down. "You do?" "Yes, I want this to be over. I want to pay you back. What you did, it was awful, but..." She took a shaky breath. Marco called me from a blocked number. He tried to ask me for money. He said I owed him. What did you do? I asked. I told him. I told him I knew a great lawyer, and that if he ever called me again, I'd make sure his wife's fraud case was the least of his problems. Then I hung up and blocked him. I was speechless. Anyway, she said, her voice rough, I'll send you the new amount. Bye, she hung up. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was something more important. It was accountability. With the money from Daphne, and with the money I was no longer hemorrhaging, my condo fund grew faster than I ever thought possible. A year after that fateful night at my apartment, I walked into a bank and was pre-approved for a mortgage. 2 months after that, I signed the papers for my own place. A bright, sunny, 2-bedroom condo on the top floor of a quiet building, with a small balcony perfect for a chair and a book. I kept my old apartment for a month after I moved, just to paint my new place and move my things slowly. The last day, I was doing a final walkthrough of the empty, clean rooms. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Daphne. Balance $0, thank you. I looked at the text. I looked around the empty apartment that had been my sanctuary and my prison. Then I typed back a reply. You're welcome. I put the phone in my pocket, walked out the door, locked it for the last time, and never looked back. My new home was waiting.